Welcome back everyone to another Weather at a Glance video. In today's forecast, we're going to be going over some colder conditions that could be making their way into the United States throughout the month of June. This is going to be over in the eastern United States over here, and we could see some colder conditions generally over the next few weeks. All coming up in just a bit. All right, now take a look at our first slide. Here we have the 500 millibar height in wind in knots from the GFS forecast model. And this is going to be showing you how our mid to upper level jet stream, we're mainly focusing on the polar jet stream here, how that's going to be shaped with the decreasing pressure, the lower pressure that we're seeing here moving over the northeast United States, and how this is going to affect your overall weather. So first off, the most notable thing that we see here is that troughing that we see over in the eastern United States here. Again, this is later over, starting throughout the end of this week and into next week. We're looking at a developing trough. We see that ridge off over here to the Great Plains, and then we see this trough that suddenly develops by June 7th here. So this is the middle of next week, and we can see we're already seeing that troughing condition, and this looks to remain throughout much of the central part of June. And then we see another trough back behind that by June 13th and June 14th, before that later clears out with this developing ridge that we see there towards the end of this model run. So we see over the next 2 weeks, we could see some troughing patterns that start to come in. And with this troughing action allows for the flooding of cold air from the north. So we're not talking about Arctic freezing air, but we're going to see those 60s, maybe even down to the 50s at nighttime. And then as we move into the daytime hours, we could see 60s and 70s, which is a lot cooler than what we are expecting for the summer so far. So this is why we are seeing cooler conditions possible as that cold air is flooded in with this troughing. Again, with the troughing, we see cooler conditions coming in from the north, and with that ridging that we see, that allows for warmer air to build up from the south. So right now, we're not looking at a ridging pattern like we would see usually over here with La Nina patterns. We are seeing a troughing action over here, and this is likely going to bring some cooler conditions for the next 2 weeks throughout June. All right, now on our next slide, we're taking a look at the GFS once again, but this time we are taking a look at that 2-meter AGL temperature anomaly. Now, what the temperature anomaly shows you is how the temperatures deviate from what you would usually see on a normal given day from past records. So you can see here, we're starting off with some warmer conditions that we have been seeing as of late. Again, this Friday, speaking of tomorrow, we're going to see some 90s and 80s up here in the Northeast and Ohio Valley, and even up over here into the farther Northeast over here, we are going to see some of those 90s. And that's not typically a normal thing that happens up here, especially in the summertime, so we really don't see that going on too often. But as you see here, that's going to quickly fade away as this troughing motion comes in. We see these cooler conditions. Generally, first off, we see some of these lower conditions, these lower below average conditions around -3, maybe -4 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit here. And then as we move into the later parts of the week, we're talking about later next week and into the week after that, we see some of these cooler conditions of around -10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit below average. So basically, that's showing a decrease in about 10 to 20 degrees below what you would normally see. So let's say if your normal average is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, you can expect temperatures of 60 degrees Fahrenheit from what this forecast model is showing you. And again, we're talking about the GFS so far. We're going to get into our next forecast model here in a second, but you can see as by the time we move into later next week, early the next week after that, we do see some of these really cold conditions come in. And what I mean by really cold is, again, not freezing conditions. We're not talking about Arctic air here. We're talking about generally 60s to 70s, which is fairly colder than what we would normally expect for areas of the Ohio Valley and Northeast in the summer months. All right, now on our next slide, we're taking a look at the same factor, the 2-meter AGL temperature anomaly in degrees Fahrenheit, but this time we're using the GDPS. This is our Canadian forecast model here. And as you can see, this is also suggesting that trend of cooler conditions. We start off warm with these above average temperatures that we see so far, but then once that troughing moves in, we see those cooler conditions back in from the north, and we see those cooler conditions generate over the Ohio Valley and in the Northeast. Now, the GDPS does make things a little more complicated with the forecast because it doesn't show as significant of a drop. So again, we see the GFS suggesting that more significant decrease in temperatures, while the GDPS suggests a more slight decrease in temperatures. But either way, we see that there is a likely decrease that's going to come with this troughing action, with the motion of those temperatures. And we do see generally about -5 to -10 degrees Fahrenheit below average there. And then we could even see down into the -20 there, so 20 degrees below average. We do see that that's a factor and a possibility with this as well. But the GDPS is not showing that as frequently and as for a long period as the GFS was. Now, moving into what you can actually see with these temperature decreases, we're looking at the GFS 2-meter AGL temperature forecast here. And as you can see so far, we're starting off with those warmer conditions again that we've been talking about towards the end of this week and moving into early next week. And then we see some of these cooler conditions. Again, look at this. We have 50s, we have 40s up here in the far northeast over nighttime. And then we see those lower additions, those lower daytime highs of around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Definitely cooler conditions than what we would normally see. And we see over here for the Great Lakes, the northern Great Lakes, we see those 60s, 50s, and even 40 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures at nighttime. Now over Lake Superior over here, we do usually see cooler conditions of around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but we're talking about inland and we're talking about over much of the land over here that we're going to be seeing those cooler conditions. This is definitely not normal, and this is due to that increase in troughing that we see coming in, and we're going to see a decrease with temperatures as we move into this troughing motion that's going to last over the next 2 weeks. So again, the timing that we're looking at right now is going to be by mid to late next week that we're going to see these really cold conditions come in. Again, we're talking, look at those, 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 43, 41 degrees Fahrenheit in central PA around State College. We see areas all around here seeing those cooler conditions overnight and daytime conditions staying in the 60s and lower 70s. So again, cooler conditions, cooler start to the summer, and really it's going to be kind of a damper on the summer conditions because everybody wants warmer conditions and hot weather to go swimming, to go participate in summer activities, but this will likely put a damper on those throughout the start of the summer. Now, looking at our Canadian forecast model, we're going to see what we can expect temperature-wise through the same motion. And as you can see so far, starting off, we see those hotter conditions. Then we're looking at around 60-degree temperatures and even into the upper to mid-50s. Again, so this doesn't show as significant of a decrease like we were talking about before with the 2-meter AGL temperature anomaly, but we do see that some of these conditions do decrease down into the 60s and daytime temperature highs of around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So not too much of a significant decrease. Again, we see some of these 40-degree temperature Fahrenheit lows overnight, but we're not seeing as significant of a decrease for the southern parts over here and into the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes region. Now, an additional forecast model we're going to check out that usually is fairly accurate with temperature, we're looking at the European model, the ECMWF here, and we're looking at the 2-meter AGL temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. Now, with this European forecast model, we can see we're suggesting some hotter conditions starting off, even more so than the GFS and the GDPS are saying. We see those 90s, those lower to mid 90s over there, generating over the Ohio Valley, up into the Great Lakes, and even into portions of some of the Northeast over here. We do see that for the end of this weekend into early next week. And then we see those cooler conditions back in throughout the Northeast here. We see those 40s, 50s, and kind of that lingering low that's really bringing that damper and cold air that's going to kind of put a damper on those summer activities here, you can see. But not so much over here for the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley. We see there's not as much of a decrease. We do see a little bit of a troughing motion and a little bit of a decrease in those temperatures, but not as much as we saw with the GDPS and the GFS. So as you can see, the GFS is suggesting the most significant decrease, and the GDPS is kind of in the middle here, and the European forecast model is suggesting not too much of a change at all. So really, what are we going to be seeing here? That's to leave up to the overall opinion. And what I believe is going to happen is we're going to kind of follow with the GDPS and say we're not going to see too much of an extreme change here, but we're also not going to see nothing happen at all. We likely will see a bit of a decrease in temperatures, nothing extreme here like 30 degrees below average, but we may see some 10-degree below average temperatures moving into much of the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and Northeast. All right, I want to thank you all so much for watching today's video. A big thanks to today's sources, Pivotal Weather, where all those forecast models seen in today's video came from. I would ask you consider subscribing for US Forecast free of charge, and I would ask you consider following the Weather at a Glance official Facebook page for more inside information and complimentary personal forecasts when you message me on my Facebook page. Again, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.